Hey y'all, thank you so much for all the love and support you've been showing me over the past few days. I really appreciate y'all. I honestly didn't know what to expect, but I'm grateful that so many of you have decided to join me on this journey, and I'm looking forward to getting some good content out to you. Before I talk about specific composers, I thought I'd answer some frequently asked questions and then get down to business. The first question is, why the term Black? In this case, the term Black is used as a placeholder for the phrase people of the African diaspora. I understand that race functions differently depending on location, time period, and can even be dictated by laws of the land. However, this database was conceived in America, and that's the main reason why I've decided to keep that term. In many American communities, many of which I'm a part of, Black is an endearing term that honors all people of African descent and the diversity within that group of people. Honestly, it's just meant to be a celebration of Africanness. And besides, there already is an African Diaspora Music Project. Shout out to Dr. Toppin. I will say though, if a composer rejects the term Black and doesn't want to be included, I would honor that. Which kind of operas can be found in the Black Opera database? As I've done my research over the years, I've ran into quite a few subgenres of opera. Obviously, you have your traditional operas and folk operas and jazz operas, but there's also hip opera. And I've seen a composer refer to his work as an R&B opera. There are gospel operas and miniature operas and virtual operas. I mean, the list can go on. Television operas and radio operas. You know, I've even seen a reggae opera, and at first I was a bit confused, but then I was like, you know what?
Hell yeah.
If the composer calls it an opera, so do I. The Black Opera database is not in the business of defining people's blackness or defining people's compositions for them. And so if we can, we try to find what the composer themselves called the opera. Sometimes there's contention between the composer and librettist. In some cases, I've seen librettists call the piece an opera profusely because that's what it was intended to be, and the composer used different terms like a dramatic musical or a drama per musica, and sometimes they would use these phrases interchangeably or just use a different phrase in each reference that I've found of their work. I've also noticed that different terms and or titles have been used in reference to the same musical works for marketing purposes, and so sometimes it gets a little hairy when you get into archives and newspaper clippings, depending on who's promoting the show. All that being said, the word opera can be just as insufficient as the word Black when it comes to categorizing things. I know that there are some operas in the database that some people would disagree are an opera at all, and that's fine. But here at the Black Opera database, we have the whole spectrum. What is Black opera? Well, that's a loaded question. Short answer, it depends on who you ask. Most people who I've talked to about this consider a Black opera to be an opera that was composed by a Black composer or an opera that was composed by a non-Black composer where Blackness or Africanness is essential to the story and or overall makeup of the opera itself. However, there are those who disagree and have different criteria for what they consider to be a Black opera, specifically when it comes to the demographics of the people who create the opera. But trying to find a definition that fits everyone's criteria is truly a fruitless endeavor. I think it's more helpful to ask more specific questions like, did a Black person write the music? Did a Black person write the libretto? Are there Black people in the show? Is Blackness essential to the story? How do Black audience members engage with this operatic work? These are things that are actually measurable, so I tend to put my focus in those areas. Speaking of measurable things, that leads me to my next question. Which works are included in the Black Opera database? The database is actually split up into 6 different sections. The first section is operas by Black composers. This is the largest section. This is the section that I've spent most of my time on. We have about 240 Black composers in this section, and about 140 of them are living. The second section of the database is operas composed by non-Black composers, in which Blackness is essential to the story and or overall makeup of the opera. Think Porgy and Bess, or Margaret Garner, or Charlie Parker's Yardbird. The third section is operas by non-Black composers that include one or more Black characters, but their race is not the focus of the opera. Their race may be the focus of their scenes, but it is not the focus of the opera overall. So think Tituba in The Crucible, Balthazar in Amal and the Night Visitors, or Monostatos in Die Zauberflöte. The fourth section is concert works that involve the singing voice that were composed by Black composers. This section is an acknowledgement that certain works do not just fit into one category. I have seen some composers title their pieces concert operas, operatorios, operatic cantatas, doxology opera. I have also noticed that some composers have elected to not use the word opera at all in reference to certain compositions, regardless if they were premiered at operatic institutions and regardless if they are very similar to compositions that they would call operas in terms of scale, style, and form. Historically, Black composers have been open to incorporating non-European performance techniques and musical genres and styles into their operas and other performance works. This practice was not widely embraced by most operatic organizations. In fact, a lot of these places would deem these compositions unfit to be performed at all in an attempt to shun them from the operatic space altogether. This discriminatory act not only negatively impacted those who intentionally expanded the genre, but also those who were traditionalists. All that being said, these are elements that give further context as to why some of these compositions are titled in a way that fit one or more categories and or transcend category altogether. The fourth section of the database was created with all of these things in mind. Similarly, section 5 is concert works that involve the voice that were composed by non-Black composers in which Blackness is essential to the story being told in the concert work. The sixth section is musicals by Black composers who have also written operas. This was added by my colleague Allison, and I think it is a cool place to have all of their stage works in one place. Stage works that involve the voice, that is. Well, that's all for now. Stay tuned for the next video. I will be talking about specific composers. I have a whole theme and everything, so hope to see you in the next video.